Greetings and welcome to the first installment of This Is Not Your Journey. My name is Matt. I'm 72. I compete at the national level in 2 sports. And 4 years ago, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. I've had 3 surgeries, 3 different kinds of radiations. And despite the fine efforts of my medical team, turns out I was metastatic, had diagnosis. I've been stage 4 for 4 years. Now a disclaimer, I am not a doctor. I have no medical training at all. Everything I say here is based on my own experience and what I've read or researched. Please consult professionals, your doctors, urologists, oncologists, radio-oncologists, witch doctor, whoever you would normally talk to. So let's start at the beginning. I had not been to the doctor in probably 10 years, when in March of 2022, I decided I should probably have a physical, see how I'm doing at 68. The general practitioner said, "Man, you look great. You're very fit. Unless there's something unusual in your blood test, I don't want to see you for at least a year." The next day, I got a call that said, "You need to come back. There's something unusual in your lab work." And so I went back and she showed me a bunch of numbers, and at the bottom was PSA, prostate specific antigen, which is an indicator possibly of cancer. Mine was 14.8, almost 4 times normal. She recommended I see a urologist. So I found one and I went there and they did another PSA test. It was roughly the same. Then they did the digital rectal exam, very enjoyable. And the doctor said, "We need to do a biopsy." So they did a biopsy and they called me back about a week later. The doctor comes in and he leans back against the counter with his arms folded across his chest. And he said, "Yes, it is cancer, and this is a disease that can take your life." So I stopped listening at that point, trying to make sense of any of it. I'd spent my whole life being healthy and fit and eating well, exercising a lot. My dad was 97 when he died. My mom was 91. My grandfather was 96. My grandmother was 101. So my urologist was a surgeon, and he said, "What we need to do is we need to go in there and take it out, a radical prostatectomy." And my first thought was, let's tap the brakes. I think I want to do some research. I said, "What kind of time do I have?" And he goes, "You got time. It's not growing that fast. So you've got a few months to decide." So I started to do my research. And what I decided to do was something called brachytherapy, which is high dose radiation that's administered directly to the prostate through long needles that are inserted through your perineum into your prostate. And they hook those to a machine that gives you a 15-minute dose of radiation. In the meantime, while I was doing my research, I had an MRI and a bone scan. Both didn't show anything, but they're not that sensitive if the cancer was indeed metastatic, which it did turn out to be. Also, the MRI showed the tumor was only about half as big as my urologist guessed using ultrasound during the biopsy. So that gave me even more time and more incentive to do more research. And the main reason I didn't want to do a radical prostatectomy is that the recovery is about 6 weeks, and I didn't want to miss that much training. With the brachytherapy, I had the procedure done on a Friday early morning and went home that afternoon. I went back to school with my job as a teacher on Monday. Prostatectomy would have taken weeks. You have to wear a catheter for 2 weeks. And the side effects with prostatectomy is about half the people have some measure of incontinence. Not a fan of that, wearing a diaper or a pad. The other one is The nerves for your erectile function are very close to the prostate. And no matter how skilled your surgeon is, even using robotics, one little slip and no more erections. So I opted for the internal radiation. Before they give you that, they give you a shot called Lupron, which is a hormone suppression. So it turns your testes off, so you don't produce any more testosterone. And so my testosterone went from 400 to 17, supposedly because it makes the cancer less resistant to the radiation. And then I had 15 sessions of external beam radiation following the brachytherapy. Now to back up slightly, when I was first diagnosed, they give you what's called the Gleason score, which is based on the type of cancer and how prevalent it is. And the scale is 3 to 5. So if you have 6, that's barely cancer because they add up 2 different scores. A 10 is the worst. You might as well gather your stuff and write your will. Mine was 4 plus 3. And then I took a genetic test that said I was intermediate unfavorable, which meant my cancer was likely to be aggressive. The other thing about brachytherapy versus radical prostatectomy is cost. Brachytherapy used to be very prevalent in the United States, but it's much cheaper than surgery. There's no hospital stay. It has been perfected in Canada. So once I knew that, I started to look for a Canadian doctor. I found her at UT Southwestern, Dr. Garant, and she's the one that did my procedure. Now, I will say this about hormone suppression therapy. Turns off your testes. So essentially you go into male menopause, hot flashes, mood swings, strange desire to watch Hallmark movies, brain fog, no libido, no erections, no interest in much of doing anything, a lot of fatigue. Part of that is from the radiation. That's one of the side effects. But after the surgery, my PSA went from 14.8 to 0.2, which is basically undetectable. Unfortunately, it didn't stay there. My PSA began to rise slowly, meaning there was still some cancer in there somewhere, probably. When the Lupron wore off, my testosterone did not rise. After 5 months, it went from 17 to 32. Normal is somewhere between 300 and 900. And I did not handle the side effects of ADT, hormone suppression, well at all. Research showed that it could take from 6 months to 2 years for your testes to fire back up enough to bring your testosterone back to normal. I did not think I would make it that long. I struggled. I wasn't suicidal, but I think I was in the zip code. Very emotional, just rot. I struggled to keep it together, often on the verge of tears, but I'm often on the verge of tears anyway. I used to tear up at SportsCenter highlights. Of course, I had no motivation, no energy, and no libido, which meant no erections, which meant I was basically existing. So after doing extensive research on testosterone and prostate cancer, where old school thinking is don't even dare to introduce that to you because it'll just make your prostate cancer catch on fire. Turns out it's much more nuanced than that. A lot of research says it's low testosterone that causes prostate cancer to grow, not high testosterone. So I basically debated my urologist into letting me do hormone replacement therapy, testosterone. So I started to inject myself in the thigh every week, every Monday, and my testosterone began to rise. At the same time, my PSA started to rise or continued to rise. In a few months, my testosterone went from 32 to over 500 finally topping out at 850. And usually it's somewhere between 700 and 800 as I've continued the weekly injections of 4 mil of testosterone. In the meantime, my PSA continued to rise slightly from point to 1.5 to 1.7 to 2.5 to 2.8. It eventually got to 3.9, slightly below the 4.0 threshold of normal. And so my oncologist decided to do a PSMA PET scan, is where you drink stuff. They put you in an MRI machine, and the tumors, if you have any, prostate cancer tumors, light up like little Christmas tree lights. And they found one in my pelvis, which was why the PSA kept rising. The lymph node they found the tumor in was in the original radiation field for the 15 sessions of external beam. How it escaped, no one knows. My urologist radiation doc and my oncologist radiation doc looked at the scan over and over again. Doesn't really matter if they just happen to miss it, because we had to do something with it. So I had a consultation with another urologist who only does surgery, and his specialty is removing lymph nodes with a robotic assist. So in April of 2024, I underwent surgery. 17 lymph nodes were removed, including the one with the tumor. Under the microscope, 4 of the other 16 were micrometastatic, which simply confirmed that I was stage 4. And then the hope was the end of it, my PSA would start to drop, continue to drop in, and if it stayed below a certain level for 5 years, then they consider you cured. Unfortunately, it did not. My PSA continued to rise from 3.9 to 4 to 5.4. And so I had a telemed with my surgeon, and how are you feeling? Yada, yada, yada. And I said, my PSA is still going up. And he goes, yeah, I thought I could help you, but I didn't. It is what it is. And that was about the brunt of the last time I ever talked to him. So one of the side effects of having a lymph node dissection, which they called the removal of those 17, is lymphedema, where your lymphatic system cannot get rid of the lymphatic fluid that generally collects in your legs, feet, ankles. Because the lymph nodes don't work, the pathways are blocked, and it can take your body some time to figure out how to find another way around and use other lymph nodes. And it is also an incurable disease, like prostate cancer, that I have. But so I did compression pantyhose and massage and vibration plates. And eventually my body figured it out. And so I have very little lymphedema, which is amazing, because most people have it till the end of time. But my PSA had risen, and so I had to have another PET scan. And this one showed a tumor in my chest. So I had a meeting with my oncologist and the radio oncologist, only it was the chief of the department, because my doctor was on maternity leave, since she had a baby. And so the chief of the department brought another doctor, and they just started over with a workup from day one of my diagnosis and treatments and side effects and other treatments. And he said, here's the deal. He says, we can give you a drug that will last 2 or 3 years. It will just stop the cancer from progressing. He goes, but there can be some unpleasant side effects. He goes, but after 2 or 3 years, the cancer will mutate and the medicine will no longer be effective. And so we'll give you another drug, and it'll last about a year, and then the cancer will mutate. And then we'll give you another drug, and it'll last about a year, and then we don't have any more drugs. So you're looking at 2 to 5 years when the medicine will no longer be effective. And if you want to know how you die of prostate cancer, generally it's not because it gets in your lymph nodes, it gets in your bones. And if you can't stop the progress of the cancer in your bones and the tumors grow, your bones start to split. And that's where all the pain comes from, and they can manage the pain for a while, but eventually they can't manage the pain. It's too great. The cancer is too many places. And then, like I watched both my parents go into hospice and get morphine every hour, and then about 3 days later, they get to go see Jesus. Or the chief of the department said, we can, what we call spot weld that tumor with 5 radiation sessions just on your chest and pinpoint that lymph node, and your PSA will probably go down for 6 months, maybe even a year. And I said, you're telling me that I can avoid starting down that slope of drugs that are eventually going to stop working for at least a year, maybe more? And he said, yeah. So that was a no-brainer. I picked that. So in October of 24, I had 5 sessions of radiation on my chest. And indeed, my PSA did drop. I went from 5.4 to 4 to 3.3, rose a little bit to 4.1, went back to 4, then went to 4.5. My last test in March was 5.0. And at 5.3, I'll have another PET scan to see if there's any more tumors. And then we'll decide what to do treatment-wise there. So the reason I say this is not your journey is it was unadvised that I should take testosterone, that I should have just sucked it up and suffered all the side effects if longevity was my only goal. But my goal is quality of life, way more important than just living X number of years. I'll see my urologist tomorrow and see what my PSA is. In the meantime, I still have no symptoms other than I get up multiple times at night to pee, but I've been doing that for decades. I do have some neuropathy in my feet, but I think that's probably unrelated. Osteoarthritis in my knees, but that's just from 70 years of playing sports. I tried platelet-rich plasma on my knee, didn't work. So I probably need to get them replaced eventually, but I'm not there. I'm living a great life. I'm doing all the things I want to do despite not following the standard of care. And again, I'm not a doctor. So be sure and consult with professionals. And I understand all the stages because I went through them all quickly. All the biopsies, all the treatments, all the drugs, all the potential side effects. So here's a bit of philosophy. So if you're scoring along from home, you probably noticed I only had 2 surgeries, but I said I had 3. I'm getting there. So prior to being diagnosed with cancer, I had been taking ED drugs for several years, and they're very effective. But as you grow older, and I was late 60s, you've got to take a higher dose for the same kind of performance. And the side effects are not terrible, but there's headaches and there's heartburn, flushed face. And after all my treatments, all my radiation, there wasn't enough Cialis or Viagra to get me anywhere near where I wanted to be. So I checked out other options, pumps and shots. You can actually take a shot with a 1/2-inch needle at the base of your penis. It's supposedly supposed to get you hard for 4 hours. I talked to my urologist and he said, yeah, it does work well for about 2 years and then it doesn't work anymore. And I didn't want to go through that. And so I decided in December of 2024 to get a 3-piece inflatable implant, which meant that ended the days of natural erections. But what it resulted in is basically an erection on demand for 10 to 15 years. There's a pump in my scrotum. You pump the saline solution that's in a reservoir behind my abdominal muscles, and it fills up 2 tubes on either side of your urethra in your penis. Now, is it as hard as when you're 20? No, but it's as hard as when you're in your 50s. And even though it's a little harder to orgasm, it lasts until you push the button and release the fluid, which is a bonus. Because I will tell you this, even if you're cured of prostate cancer, you're not necessarily whole. I'm on a couple chat rooms where guys are constantly talking, or their partners are talking about the difficulties of a man who can no longer perform, on what a huge deal that is for a man's ego if he can no longer perform, even though it's counterintuitive because most women, or 75% of women, do not orgasm through penetration alone. But for a dude, it's a big deal. It was a big deal for me. And so I had that operation, and it takes about 6 weeks before you can take it out for a test spin. And then you kind of got to get used to it, but it's pretty phenomenal, actually. Now, Medicare pays 80% of it. So mine was about $6,000 for me, which is well worth it. And so I had that done. And I'm really pleased. If you want to reach out, you can. Side effect, after the surgery for the implant, I developed a hematoma, a blood clot, in my scrotum, about the size of a walnut. And man, it hurt. So I went back and said, hey, is this what happens? He goes, no. Infrequently that happens here. The good news is your body will reabsorb it. The bad news is it's really going to hurt for at least a week. So keep ice on it, which I did. So realistically, the 5-year survival for stage 4 is 35%. So I'm not in the 65% that are dead because I'm halfway through my 5th year. And if you last 5 years, the chances of surviving the next 5 years is about 60%. And if you survive to year 10, the chances of surviving to year 15 is about 80%. Those numbers don't mean much for the people who are in the wrong side of the equation. So, barring new drugs or divine intervention, and I have had quite the spiritual reawakening. And at the church I go to, I've been prayed over probably 30 times since February for healing, if not my cancer, at least my heart and my ability to handle what I may face in a few years. So all my decisions for treatment and follow through and everything else is based on quality of life. I want to be able to do the things I want to do for as long as I can, fully and completely. I have 3 kids, 4 grandkids, a lovely grand dog, and I want to be able to go see all their stuff and to compete in all my sports and just live as well as I can for as long as I can, because we all know the end of cancer is not pretty. The last year, especially the last 6 months, you just waste away and really give you drugs to kill you. So again, here's some advice. Get checked. One of my friends, a girl I dated, her husband committed suicide with a gun. Now, I committed suicide by neglect. I didn't go to the doctor for 10 years. And so had I gone 3 years earlier, 5 years earlier, 7 years earlier, we wouldn't be making this video because I probably would have had surgery or radiation and been done with it. But I didn't. So I'm a cautionary tale. So please get treated. And here's some other things. One, when you get your diagnosis, don't panic. It doesn't help. Yeah, sure, it's stunning and confusing, but you don't want to make a quick decision. You want to look at all your options, all the treatments, all the side effects, all the drugs. And if you have a partner, make sure that involve them because it means a great deal to them, your intimate life. Get more opinions, lots of opinions. I read studies until I went blind, and then I could talk to my urologist about them. And he would say, hey, you're the most informed patient I have, and so we can have a meaningful debate, because I wanted to do what I thought would be the best for me to maintain my quality of life. Another point is be an advocate. You don't like your doctor, get a new one. You don't like your surgeon, get a new one. You don't like your anesthesiologist, wait till the surgery's over. You can't really switch in the middle. But be an advocate for yourself, because it's your life. You're the only one. And you got to remember, these people are busy and they're in a hurry and they're underpaid despite how much they make. And they deal with life and death stuff every day. And they don't want to hurt you. And so when I basically said, I want to do this, they said, that might hurt you. And I go, yeah, but that's me hurting me, not you. Find support where you can. At your church, I'm trying to start a prostate cancer support group at my church. Haven't made much progress, but God's timing is God's timing. Exercise, workout. Both my oncologist and urologist say that part of my ability to exceed expectations, probably just some genetics, but my fitness level. Because if you have comorbidities, as they call it, diabetes, you're overweight, you don't exercise, high blood pressure, hypertension, all those things will not help you battle cancer or anything else, and you'll feel better. Eat smart. I'm not supposed to have caffeine because that can increase my lymphedema, so I drink caffeine-free Diet Coke, coffee, try to stay away from a lot of fast food. And this applies to life in general, find something you just love to do where you lose track of time, whether it's a hobby or it could be a job. I work in an alternative high school as an ISS teacher, and it is interesting every day because there are so many broken kids in the world. And again, this is only my experience. So please don't use what I did as a guide, but do your research. There is a ton of stuff out there. They've made advances since I was diagnosed 4.5 years ago. And go back to church. Hide it. I missed it. I drifted from my faith. And even though it wasn't the cancer that drove me ultimately back, it was a pretty girl. Always seems to be the case. Nonetheless, find a body of believers who will pray for you and do life with you and walk beside you. And remember, Jesus is with you through it all. It doesn't mean he's going to take it away, but he'll be there through the suffering. And suffering brings about resilience. The Bible does not promise we won't have trouble. We will. So thanks for listening. And if I can think of some other things, I'll make a video about them too. May God's peace and grace be with you.